Hello and welcome back to the channel. For today's tutorial, I'll be doing a requested video of how to draft a notched blazer jacket. And if it's your first time viewing this channel, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So let's start. So this is the drafting paper that I'm working with, and I've gone ahead to mark out my vertical measurements, which is my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to waist, my shoulder to hip. And we are starting from the back pattern, and if you notice, this pattern does not have an under bust. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to place my tape, and I'm going to mark my shoulder circumference divided by 2. And because I'm attaching sleeve to this dress, I'm going to add ½ inch to my shoulder measurement. From there, I'm going to go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. But before I draw my shoulder slant, I'm going to go ahead to draw my neckline. So for the back pattern, I'm making use of the neckline of 3 inches width and 1.5 inches depth. And remember, just like I said, we are drafting the back part of this dress because we are going to use it for the neckline of the front part. So after drawing the neckline, I'm going to go ahead to draw my shoulder slant. So I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to connect it down to that 1 inch at my shoulder for my shoulder slant. So the next step I'm going to take is to get my chest line. To get your chest line is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, or you go up by 1 inch from your bust line. So I'll go ahead to place my tape and I'm going to draw a line at that point for my chest line. After drawing out the line, I'm going to label this as CL, meaning chest line. I'm going to place my ruler and I'll go ahead to draw a straight line at this point. So what I'm going to do right now is to draw the armhole for the back part. But before I do that, I'll go ahead to measure my bust divided by 4 and I'm going to mark. So there are 2 ways of drawing this armhole. So I'm just going to draw a basic armhole for this, and I'm going to go ahead to explain the other one. I'll divide my armhole into 2 and I'll go ahead, go in by ½ inch and then place my French curve, connect it from that point, and I'll take it upwards. So after drawing out, this is what I have. So for the second type of armhole you're going to draw, you're just going to measure half of your chest line and you're just going to place and draw this way. So you're not going to go in at the shoulder. So next, I'm just going to outline my armhole. So the next step I'm going to take from here is to mark my dart. So to mark my dart, I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is 3.5. I'm going to mark it at the chest line, at the bust line, at the waist line, and at the hip line. After marking it, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line connecting from the chest line down to the waist, down to the hip line. I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to mark about 1 inches upwards for my dart. Then at the waist line, I'm going to mark 0.5 inch at both sides. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place my ruler and I'm going to connect from the bust point down to the waistline, and I'm going to repeat it for the both sides. So after marking that from the waistline, I'm going to take it down to that 1 inch mark that I made below, and I'm going to connect the both sides. So after connecting it, this is what I have. So at the waistline, I'm going to go in by ½ inch. So the reason why I'm doing this is to give it that tightening effect at the back. So I'll go ahead to extend it, the line upwards, and then extend it to the lower part of the dress. So after this, the next thing we'll be doing, so next you'll be inserting your body circumference. So I'm going to mark my bust divided by 4 and I'm going to mark 1 inch sewing allowance. To my waist, I'm going to place and mark my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead to mark this 1 inch dart at this point, and I'm going to go ahead to replace it. After marking that, I'm going to go ahead and mark my 1 inch sewing allowance. Going down to the hip line, I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to mark, and I'll just go ahead to mark 1 inch sewing or ease allowance. So next I'm going to connect my line, so don't be confused with that second dot I have there. It's actually a mistake. So from there I'm just going to connect it to the waistline and take it down to my hip line. So the pattern for my back is ready, and all I'm just going to do right now is to go ahead and mark ½ inch to give it that slant by the side. And I'm just going to do that. I'll go ahead and outline my pattern at the lower part. So next I'm just going to measure what I have at the shoulder, and I'm going to divide it into 2. I'll go ahead to make a mark, and from that point I'm going to connect it down to the chest line. So with this, my back pattern is ready, and the next step I'm going to take right now is to cut out this pattern. So I'll just go ahead to label the back part of my pattern as back, and I'll go ahead and cut it out. So at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and leave your comment at the comment section, or any question that you have pertaining this particular tutorial. So moving over to the front pattern of this dress, all my measurements is going to start from this line. So for the front, I'm going to go ahead to mark 4 inches inwards. So this depends on the size of the lapel you want to create for your blazer or jackets. I'm going to measure about 4 inches inwards, and I'm going to go ahead to use a ruler, and I'm going to connect the line. After doing that, the next thing is to mark my vertical measurement. I'm going to mark my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to waist, and my shoulder to hip line. But in the process I forgot and I marked my shoulder to under bust, but I'm still going to take it off later. So after marking my waist, I'm just going to measure about 7 inches to get my hip point, and I'm going to repeat the same process over here, and I'm going to draw a straight line connecting these marks that I have made. So to avoid you getting more confused, I'm just going to fold in this part inwards, and I'm going to bring it out when is much needed. Then I'll go ahead to mark out my vertical measurement, which is my bust, my waist, and the hip line, and I'm going to go ahead to take off this under bust line because we are not making use of under bust for this particular pattern. So all my measurements is going to start from this line, and from that point I'm going to mark my neckline, which is the basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches. So I'll go ahead to draw out my neckline. So from that point I'm going to place my tape, and I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2 because I'm attaching sleeve. I'll go ahead to add ½ inch, and from that point I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. Then I'm going to place my ruler, and I'm going to connect it for my shoulder slant. Next I'm going to place my tape, and I'm going to mark my chest line, which is my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to draw out my chest line, and I'm going to draw a line connecting it to the chest line. So I'll go ahead to measure what I have there, and I'm going to go ahead to divide it by 2. Then I'm going to come in by ½ inch, and from that ½ inch point I'm going to place my French curve, and I'm going to connect it from my chest line down to the shoulder point. So from this point, the next step we're going to take is to mark your dart intake, and from that line I'm going to measure my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is 3.5, and I'm going to mark at my bust point, at my waist point, and down to my hip point, and I'm going to go ahead to use a ruler and connect it. So from this point I'm just going to mark 1 inch for my bust point, and at this point I'm going to mark 2 inches upwards for my dart. Then at my waistline I'm going to mark 0.5 inches at both sides of the waist. Now it's time to connect from the point I made upwards down to the waistline, and down to that 2 inches I came upwards from. So I'm going to repeat this process for the other parts too. So after marking this, the next step you're going to take is to insert your body circumference. At the bust line I'm going to insert the bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to go ahead to mark, and then mark 1 inch for ease of sewing allowance. Going down to the waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference. I'm going to measure this dart intake and I'm going to replace it. After replacing it, I'm just going to mark 1 inch. At the hip point, I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4. So I'll go ahead also to mark extra 1 inch at the hip line, just like I did before. So after marking that, the next step is to connect from your bust. So whatever I have at my bust, I'll extend to my chest line and I'm going to take it down to my waistline. After marking to my waistline, I'm going to connect to my hip and I'm just going to use my French curve a bit to connect that part. So after connecting it, I'm just going to place my tape and mark 1/2 inch from that point also, and I'm just going to connect it down to my hip point. Now we'll be drafting the lapel area of this blazer or jacket. So from the hip part, I'm going to go out by 1 inch, and at my waistline you can go out by 1 inch. So right now you can just stop at your waist, but I'm just going to go up by 2 inches from my waistline, and I'm still going to mark that 1 inch. So after making that mark, I'm just going to go ahead and connect it down. After connecting it down, I'm also going to outline the lower part, which is the hip area. Now from this 2 inches you went up by, you're going to connect it to your shoulder. And also, if you're stopped at the waistline, you're going to connect from the shoulder down to your waistline also. So I'm just going to connect first with my pencil in case I have any error or mistake, and I'll go ahead to correct it. So after doing that, I'll just use my marker and I'm going to outline the marks that I have made. So after doing that, I'm just going to indicate the button area of this jacket. So for my neckline in front, I will be coming out by 2 inches. So this totally depends on how wide you want your lapel to be. So after marking out that 2 inches, I'm going to connect it right back to the button allowance. Just to give it a little curve at the upper part, and use my French curve and I'm going to place and connect. So it's totally okay for you to just draw. So if you notice some lapel, they are a bit curvy while some are just straight. So you can just go ahead and do what you want, and you're going to take it down to your button allowance just like I said. So next we'll be moving over to the collar part of this jacket, and I'm going to open up this other side. And for the jacket part, you need your back pattern because you're going to measure the back neckline of your jacket. So I'm going to be showing you 2 methods of drafting a collar. So I'm going to do this one right here because of people that actually want to learn how to draft, and while sewing I'm going to use another method of cutting out the collar. So what you're going to do right now is you're going to measure what you have at the back of your neckline and you're going to draw a line. So go ahead and draw out the line. So what you're going to do now is whatever you measured at the back neckline, you're going to place it and you're going to mark it on that line. So right now you're going to determine the size of collar you want. You can use about 2.5 inches to 3 inches. So I'm just going to use 2.7 inches, 2.75 inches, and I'm going to make a mark. So while you're making a mark, please tilt your tape upwards, like where the collar is going to. Do not bend it down. So after that, I'm just going to make a mark at that point and I'm going to connect it. After connecting the line, we'll be moving over to the notched part of the collar. So from here, I'm going to mark 1 inch inwards from your lapel. So from this point of the lapel, from the tip, I'm going to go ahead and measure 0.75. You can go ahead to measure 0.5 is okay. This totally depends on the gap you want to give at this point, and you're just going to connect it down to that 1 inch mark. So the next thing you're going to do is you're just going to take your French curve drew and you're going to place to connect, and make sure whatever you're drawing is equal. So after drawing, this is what I have at this point at the collar. Now to make your collar more relaxed, you're going to mark about 0.25 inches from this point. This is to enable it to relax very well at the back, and you're just going to go ahead to connect it from that point down to your neckline in front. So after doing this, the next step you're going to take is to go ahead and measure your shoulder, divide it into two, and after dividing it into two, you're going to make a mark at that point. Then you're going to connect from this point down to your chest line. So I'm just going to connect from my bust down to my chest line, and from that chest line area I'm going to take it down to my shoulder, and I'll go ahead to blend the line from my bust to my chest line to avoid a sharp edge. So with this, the blazer is ready. Now going over to the lower part of this blazer in front, I'm just going to give it a slight curve. I'm going to measure 1.5 inches, and I'm going to place my French curve, and I'm going to create a curve at this part. So this is totally optional if you want to or if you don't want to, but I just want to give it that curvy look at that point. So with this, your pattern is ready, and what you're going to do is to cut it out. So I'm also going to cut out the dart area also while cutting out this particular pattern. So after cutting it out, this is what I have for my pattern, and I will go ahead to label it. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Don't forget to hit on the subscribe button and leave your comment at the comment section below. Thank you.